This interview contains minor, only mostly devastated spoilers.
Hi everyone, welcome back to A Very Queer Book Club. Today I'm super excited to be sitting down with a children's librarian to chat about Only Mostly Devastated, about her life as a librarian and representation in literature and a lot more. It also happens to be my mom, which is very, very exciting. If you've not purchased your copy of the book, you can do so by following the link in the description below to purchase it from Little Shop of Stories in Decatur, Georgia, which happens to also be one of my mom's favorite indie bookstores in Georgia. So without any further ado, here is Ada Demlow. Well, hi, thank you so much for joining me. Will you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm Ada Demlow, and my pronouns are she, her, and I don't know if I'm the only one that has an identity crisis anytime someone says, tell me about yourself, but in terms of I am a children's librarian who's been married for 34 years with 2 adult children, including yourself and a sister.
Well, amazing. Well, tell me a little bit first. I'd love to know, because I know a lot of people, I asked, I was talking to people, and a lot of people don't know, like, what does a typical day in the life of a librarian look like? And let's first talk about what a typical day in the life looked like before March.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's definitely definitely different. And I'm focusing more, of course, on a typical day for a children's librarian, which because of course librarianship is broad and diverse, and a lot of people's jobs look very different than mine. But before March, my job would look like coming in the morning and setting up for programs for young children, because the morning was pretty much focused to 0 to 5-year-olds and their grown-ups. And I would set up the space, be ready to spend the whole morning either doing story times or just supervising times where families are there playing and visiting. And it would be a very noisy, busy time with kids making art, kids playing with blocks, parents sitting on the carpet reading a story to their child, coming in for my story times when they happened, and coming back and playing some more. And then they would kind of start to disappear come lunchtime. And that's when after lunch, I'd have a couple hours of quiet. That's when I'd be doing my book ordering, planning for the next thing, just kind of getting my thoughts together. Then the afternoons, a little bit later, between 3 and 4, those school-age kids start rolling in to do homework or to ask for help with books, or sometimes they also wanted to just play and get some downtime, or families needing space to set up and do homework, and that's away from the screens at home. And a lot of families would just come and pop in the library. So that was what my days would look like pre-March. So
and now, how has that changed in this new virtual world we live in?
Almost entirely. Our library only allows 25 people in at a time.
Wow.
So it's very quiet. We don't have any programming in-house, and our toy area is completely closed down. So as you can imagine, I still see traffic coming in throughout the day, but they're mostly coming in, getting books, and leaving. And then in between, I've got people that don't come in at all, that'll email or call for you to gather books for them and put out on our curbside cart. So it's much, much quieter and just a very different kind of space, a lot less interaction.
Right. And I remember at the beginning of this, you were doing Facebook Live. You were like, me and you were kind of learning this whole virtual world at the same time. It was really fun.
Yeah, and we did a lot of that in the spring and summer, and we are going to be starting back in September with that. We were kind of giving ourselves breaks in between to kind of see where things were going, but we're definitely virtual through the end of this calendar year. So that will kick back up. And yes, I've had to learn a lot of virtual things that I never thought I'd be learning.
Right. Yeah. And I want to know, what you've been a librarian my entire life. And before that even, what kind of drew you to librarianship, and what made you want to pursue that?
Well, when I'd always loved books as a child. And I was always had a notebook where I was writing stories. And so I think I always imagined myself being an author. And then I went to college, and no one ever really presented. I have to say, I don't remember any experience of having someone even make being a librarian seem like a career, So I that really never entered my mind for some reason, even though I knew librarians. I loved our public librarian. For some reason, that was never presented. Maybe it was that stereotype that they're just volunteers. I don't know, but it never got presented as an option. So I majored in journalism, but then when I had to do an internship, I ended up at it was a book publishing company. Well, they also published a magazine, Writer's Digest, but I ended up on the book publishing arm. And so I spent a whole summer wrapped up in the world of books and went, oh, this is what I like. And when I got back home, I was kind of looking around what's in our area that I can do book-wise that could be a career. And the local university had a Master's of Library Science. And it was like when I saw the program, I went, of course. And so that's kind of, it was a stumbling in, but yet it was always what I should have done. I just feel like it wasn't presented as an option, or you didn't think of it as one.
So you found it, and then the rest, as they say, is history.
Right. People tend to think of teachers, like they'll say to me, oh, you must have used to been a teacher. And it's like, no, I've always been a librarian, and we are teachers too, but I just think the perception isn't there.
It's complex and it's different.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I'd love to chat a little bit about Only Mostly Devastated. I remember you read it a little bit a while ago.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on first thoughts on that book?
I think I really liked, was the way the book was in some ways so typical of a teen romance. It just was very, very typical and to the point, predictable. You knew kind of things that were going to happen. But on the other hand, it was so standout because it featured diverse characters, and that was made typical. It's hard to put into words, but it was standout in its being typical and in the audience it was reaching. And I loved that about the book. And I also, I think that was the first thing that stood out. And then also when very early in the book, in Ollie's inner dialogue, he is stressing a little bit about coming out to his new schoolmates. And I thought, okay, this is going to be a different kind of a book in terms of, it's not just about the coming out the first time, which is often what they are. It's reminding people that it's a lifelong coming out, and then you're in a new situation. Even though he was in a family where he was accepted and it was all pretty normal, but he still had to feel the fear of, okay, I've got these new people. When do I do this?
Kind of to a new town that is a little scarier.
Right.
Well,
so I knew that then we had reached a new kind of area with these kinds of books, because it's sort of like with African American literature, which with the struggle as a librarian is finding books that aren't just always about the civil rights era or about one thing, but that they get, and it's like, okay, we're reaching beyond just I've got to come out to my parents kind of.
Right. It's more than civil rights. It's more than coming out. It's more than.
Right. It's bigger than that. We're reaching more of the story. Yeah.
And I would love to know, you mentioned that you loved the fact that it was normal because it was, and that's when I was talking to Sophie, the author, she was like, I set out to write a book that was so tropey and so every single trope you've ever known. She was like, I didn't set out to write anything groundbreaking, but I'm like, because you set out to write something so tropey with these two male characters, it became something I think groundbreaking.
How it hit me.
Are there any specific moments that you think you can recall in the book in terms of representation or diversity that you think really stood out? I
really liked the whole kind of subplot of Ollie and I think Laura. Mm-hmm. And, her as a bi character, and just but also the way they both grew through their friendship, because they couldn't stand each other, and then they started to understand each other better, and then they helped each other with their own individual stories. So that, I don't know if that's what you were kind of thinking about, but I remember liking that subplot a lot.
I would love to know also, because you grew up in the era of Grease when it came, that was something you grew up with. And, obviously we watched it when I was growing up. What did you think about the kind of spin on Grease? What was that like?
Oh, I love that. Because Grease was actually I remember I still remember having the record album of Grease and blasting it when my mom wasn't home on the record player. That was because I was allowed to listen to the music before I could see the movie. I don't think I had seen the movie yet because I was in a kind of a strict household. And, but I remember loving that. And then when I saw the movie, I'm like, whoa, I remember being ground, but then I liked the way, I wish you told me in your book club that you went through and kind of found all the different things. I did a little bit of that when I read it, but that's kind of what I want to do on a reread is kind of test myself. Can I find them all? And I want to know, does the author have a list? Does she make a list of all of the places
I'm sure she does. Well, I think there's like small, like
I would think that would be a fun quiz,
Well, there's like big things, but there's even like, there's a moment that Ollie is playing his guitar and he notes the chord progression. And it's not something I would have ever noticed, but I was talking to a friend who's a musician and it's like, that's the chord progression of, I think Grease is the word. And they were like, it's something so small like that. So it's like, there's small things, there's big things, like characters obviously have like Frenchie, and there's like different characters that have parallels.
Yeah, I think it's cool. I would like to get to read it again and thinking about that more. I mean, the obvious things jumped out right away. I mean, the whole when they were getting ready for the party and that scene, and then of course the summer loving, and
the whole like first couple chapters of the book is like a direct plop out from Grease.
Right. But that was fun, and I think that would probably make it engaging conversation for teachers with students because they could kind of see different things. So I don't know how much the generation now. I mean, when did you see Grease? I mean, I don't know.
I think it was like high school. It had to have been high school, but also you could compare it also then to, because it was my generation, High School Musical. Because High School Musical was Grease as well.
That's true. Yeah.
So it's like, I mean, it was like sold and like people promoted it as a queer Grease retelling, but also you could say High School Musical because High School Musical was an adaptation of Grease.
Right.
So I would love to know, kind of changing gears a little bit again, what do you think, because obviously as a children's librarian, you work with kids every day. Why do you think it's so important for kids from such a young age to read? Why is that such a big thing?
Well, just reading in terms of not even thinking about diversity, reading from the time they're young. I mean, reading, this is something that's kind of passionate for me, is that often in the libraries, people come in asking about reading as a skill, and they don't think about the other side of things, which is reading as kind of a lifelong passion. And when children are read to when they're very young, it does two things. One, it does help them learn how to read. It gives them they learn all the mechanics and they start to hear words and all that great stuff. But they're also building a relationship with the person that is reading to them and with those who are around them when they get into the classroom setting and with their classmates. And in the long run, if children need relationships with other readers in order to continue to grow as a reader. And so that's kind of why I think reading is so important for us to do with kids in lots of different contexts, whether it be, an after school program in school, a one-on-one at home, that they learn to read with others and talk about what they're reading and they grow.
Well, and you mentioned something that it was something you were passionate about, and you actually just started your own Bookstagram. Books for Raising Good Humans. I would love to know just a little bit, and I'll put a link to it in the description. What was the inspiration for that, and what the origin, and and tell us a little bit about it.
I've been kind of playing around on and off with different ideas for blogging ever since. I mean, social media has always intrigued me as a way to reach people with ideas. I'm, not of a generation that it comes as natural, but it's something that's, in terms of it always having been part of my life, it's something that came out in my adult life. So I've always been interested in playing around, and I used to kind of blog and just share like story time ideas with other librarians, and I didn't find that terribly always exciting, but I knew that I wanted to do something. And I think the time in the pandemic has given me time to just think about what is it I most love in terms of with my passion with books, and what do I want to share. And it really is the idea about books not just being an educational tool, but but something that can transform you in a bigger way. And so I'm not necessarily wanting to have people turn books into something that they can bash people over the head with, to teach them something. This book will tell you how to be generous, or this book, but rather to see books as a way, the more you read and the more diverse books you read, the better human you can become, because there's no way in our lifetimes we can have all the experiences we need to understand everybody's experiences. But a book can do that. So there's experiences I may never have ever. So that's what I want. I want to see more and more. We have parents coming in who are not readers themselves, and so I want to get them inspired, not to just get their kids to read, but them to go back, find out how exciting a kid's book is, read some middle grade books, read some young adult books, and become a reader yourself. And that's going to be the best way.
Right. Well, I think a lot of times people forget you don't have to be a high schooler to be reading a young adult book.
Right. Exactly. I mean, yes, you will see a difference in maybe how the themes get developed. They're going to stick with more the maturity of the age of 4, but they're definitely, yes. I mean, I love middle grade and young adult, and get enriched by them and meet characters that I wouldn't otherwise meet in other books, and see things in new ways.
And I know we're talking about Only Mostly Devastated, but I had it sitting right next to me. Like, one of the books that comes to mind for all the time when I think about middle grade being so important is The Best at It. And it was literally sitting right here. And I'm like,
that's funny, because I had written down to talk about that one with you. Yeah, I read that last year, and it's also intersectional because it has the Indian American, and that's a book you had asked me to share some things I'd recommend, and that's a good one. And I'm glad those kind of books are around now. They weren't. I mean, that's one of the nice changes, to see more of that in middle grade.
I would love to know, do you have any advice for maybe other librarians that are trying to diversify the collections they have in their own libraries?
Yeah, I've had to work hard at that, because I think some libraries are fortunate to have their collections developed by a team of librarians, and so that already automatically helps right there. But it's just me, so I have to be very, very conscious of what I'm doing, that it doesn't just reflect me. And one of the things that obviously the We Need Diverse Books movement is one to follow. I follow a lot of authors, bloggers like yourself, and other that share resources. I follow enough things so that when I'm reading through my threads, I'm going to always see new things coming through. And and then also I look through lists put out by professional journals of they're really getting better about putting out, here's hot new diverse titles that'll be coming out this year. And I make sure I add those to my collection. And it's also, though, not just what I buy, it's when you're making reading decisions. Do you see things that you have in your collection that are stereotypes and dated that need to be removed? Not in a censorship kind of way, but they're dated. It's no longer relevant, and part of weeding is getting rid of things that are no longer relevant, or maybe they may never have been relevant, but at least you can say for sure they're not relevant now.
Like, if you can find a book that is newer that serves the same purpose and better.
That's what, exactly. And that you're in other words, we have something better now, so let's get this one. And also, for me, it's also been about intentionality and adding diverse materials to programs, and what you choose to highlight and put on display and put on book lists. I mean, you may have a book that you keep in your collection because it's a classic, but it has stereotypes in it, so it may not be on a book you put of recommended reads. So there's a difference, so it's really
if someone's looking for it.
Right. Yes. And so, and there's this is a hot topic on librarian groups list these days, in terms of, because, of course you don't want to get into a role of censorship, but also being responsible and having conversations about, what that looks like and what that means. Do you keep something around as a teaching tool of what not to do, but do kids really understand that? And so it's to me, it's the most important thing is to never think you're finished. Oh, my collection is finally diverse, I represent everybody. You're never done. It's always learning, always growing, always being an eye open to new things.
And how do you see because obviously I think the role of a library has changed obviously so much this year in people's lives, but also just over the past 20, 30 years, what the role of a library as a public service has changed so much. And can you talk a little bit about some different things that maybe libraries do that people wouldn't think about?
One thing about libraries that I think hasn't changed is that we're about access. I think, and it's just that what we are providing access to has changed dramatically, because it used to would have just been books on a shelf and only books on a shelf. And now we are access to Wi-Fi. To folks who are not in areas that have Wi-Fi. We are access to computers and technology. We are access to diverse books for kids who may not, be able to have them in their home for whatever reason, or don't have them available to them. We are also community centers in our library. And I think a lot of libraries, which has been the biggest hardest thing about the pandemic is we weren't just a place where people come and get books to take home and read to their children. We're a place where people come to meet each other, where families come to connect with each other, and where, I mean, we're community centers as much as we are collections of books. And I think that's been a big thing. And a lot of libraries have got maker spaces now and have moved a lot into higher tech. My particular library hasn't done as much of that, but it is still, all about it is embracing access. What does your community need? I think we have other avenues in our community that they can access that. But if they don't, what can you provide access to that's not in your community?
A couple fun things. In Only Mostly Devastated, who did you relate to the most?
Well, okay, I told you about the Ollie and Lara theme, but I also really related to Will in some ways, in that Will was a deeply kind person. You can see in various scenes, I mean, in terms of how he embraces Ollie when his Aunt Linda dies and the different things that happen. But he also does some pretty mean, cruel things in the storyline because of his struggle in not being able to be himself around peers or around family and issues around his identity. And so I kind of really understand that as a human being, that you can be a kind person that sometimes does something unkind or cruel because of a struggle you're having, but he also grows and owns that too. So I think I really like that.
And then who would you want to be best friends with? Who would you want to hang out with?
She was a minor character, but I really wanted to get to know better and hang out with Aunt Linda. I loved that. That was one of the things I loved about the book that I didn't say earlier, was that it was a plot device in some ways to have why did Ollie end up in this town, but she didn't just leave Aunt Linda as a plot device. You got to really know her and her relationship with Ollie and her kids, and I liked that it became a real and meaningful part of the story. And also, I just think I love being an aunt and the ways you can help shape the. So I just loved their relationship, her and Ollie's, and the way she played an important role in the book as a minor character. So I definitely would want to get to know her. So.
I think what's so cool about Aunt Linda, and I think it's so important to see in literature, is the adult yes, because obviously it's, when we see so many books with the parents that have to like come to terms and come around, they have to come around, and they do by the end.
Yeah.
It's so cool to see adult characters that are just 100% supportive from the get-go.
Yes. And I like, yes, I mean, she was just she's the kind of person you're like, yeah, I'd sure love hanging out in a coffee shop with you, Linda.
And I wanted to, so, I mean, obviously, I've started talking a lot more about books during quarantine publicly, but I've been reading forever. So I would love, just because I'm selfish, I want to talk about me. When did you know that I was going to be a reader?
It's hard to name moments when it's something that's been part of a life forever. Like, I mean, you had a bookshelf in your room before you were in your room, when you, and we were reading to you all the time, and you liked it, and you were always, you were always engaged with the books on your bookshelf, even if it was just stacking them up to build them into something as kids do, but the books were just a part of your life. And then I think when you hit in elementary school, where your teachers were reading out loud to you in addition to the reading you were doing at home, and you would come home and you would be like, I want to buy such and such a book, because you wanted to get ahead of where your teacher was, because you didn't want to just wait for her to get to whatever the next chapter. That was when I knew, okay, yeah, he's hooked.
That sounds like brand. That sounds right. And so I would love to know, because I mean, we've been Zooming during quarantine, but what are some things that you've been doing in quarantine to just like stay healthy, stay sane, because it's a crazy time?
Well, I don't know how healthy and sane I'm staying, but we'll see. I mean, honestly, I wish I was saying I was reading more. But I've struggled on and off and to read as much as I thought I would read when you imagine yourself having more time. Of course, I have gone back to work, so I'm not as quarantined as I was at the start. But I think I've been trying to find ways to relax more. I've drinking lots of tea and taking long naps, and looking forward to the cooler weather because I love to walk.
Yes.
But I think somewhat that books for Raising Good Humans is sort of what I've done too. It's just doing something I really love when a lot of what I really love in my day job is kind of not there right now.
Why do you think it's important for children and teens to be exposed to all different types of people in their reading? You know, obviously it was important to read things that I saw myself in, but it's also important to read things that are not about people not like me. And so why do you think that's so important for especially young people?
Well, I always go back when I get asked questions like that. Rudine Bishop, she's a professor. I think she's retired now, but at Ohio State University. And she describes books as mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. And she says, when we need to have books that we see ourselves in, but then we need books that mirror windows that we see other worlds in. And then we need them also to be sliding glass doors that allow us to actually enter those other worlds. And all of those things are important to being, and for different, and the same, what's cool is the same book that might be a mirror for you could be a window for somebody else. And so a book isn't just one thing. It's just that's why it's important to introduce all kind of books to all kind of readers, because maybe the book that was a mirror for me I read it to a group and it's a window, and then they understand me better. And then I share a book was a window for me, and they see themselves. I'll never forget, it was in story time, and I do in my 2-3-year-old group, an every week thing was to sing the song about Brown Bear, Brown Bear. And instead of using the book, there's been some large cutouts made with Eric Carle's illustrations. And the last one is Children, Children, What Do You See? And it has a picture of a group of diverse children. And I don't know what prompted it, but when I held that up, a little girl came up and she pointed at one of the pictures, and she looked back at her caregiver and she said, "That's me!" And she was so excited. And I thought, yeah, that's why we need to make sure we have pictures that are representing, all different races and all different, because she was so excited to realize she saw someone that was her. Even the little things like that, which, there's bigger things we do in libraries to represent, but every little thing matters.
And we talked a little bit about the best at it, but I would love to know, what are some other things you've read recently that you have found that you've really either loved or you have found really great diversity representation in?
In terms of other middle grade, like the best, another one I read recently that I just really loved is The List of Things That Will Not Change by Rebecca Stead. And it's more of the traditional story in that early on middle grade literature that featured LGBTQ characters tended to be the parents or a relative. And this is about a young girl who's going through the divorce of her parents, and then her father is getting remarried to his boyfriend. But the cool thing about this one is that it's very clear that there's family support, even his ex-wife, that it's not like the old books would have been where there's this, I don't know, where it's controversial. It's just, this is our family's changing and this is how it's changing. But here's the list of things that won't change. We still love you. That it's just a very tenderly told, poignant story of what it's like to go through this particular experience. And another, I think picture books, the standout from this past year was When Aiden Became a Brother.
Oh, I love that
by
book.
Kyle Lukoff. Just because it is about something that is a very, very common theme in picture books, which is the whole theme of a new sibling coming into the family. Parents come in pretty much once a week asking for that. We got a new baby and preparing, but the way this book handles that with the trans child, the trans boy brother, and the sensitivity in which they are thinking about how to welcome this new sibling, and how the things that they didn't like about their welcome, the assumptions, and so how they're going to do it differently. And I really loved the illustrations and the family, because it's just a wonderful story. And because it's such a common theme of picture books, but it's done in such a beautiful way that is diverse, I hope it means that there's going to be lots more of that kind of thing, where it's just stories that you always find, but they represent better. And then another thing I've been reading, it's on the other opposite kind of end of the spectrum of a picture book. I'm in a 6-month read along with a group of other folks, some of them librarians, some of them not, of the book Stamped from the Beginning. And it's a book about, like, it's a very ambitious read. And getting back to why I think it's important to teach children to be connected to other readers. What's getting all of us through this book is that we're reading it together, and we have goals to get online and kind of chat. And so but without it being such a strict like commitment to, I have to have this page done by this day, but it motivates me. The motivation is that there are other readers counting on my input and my insight. And so it's a very ambitious read, but I've learned I've only gotten through the first 6 chapters, and whoa, it's some powerful stuff. The same author of How to Be a Racist, which I also read. It's just a faster read than this one. This one's packed with history. Ooh.
Cool. And so last two things, more, I would love to know, as a children's librarian, if you were given an unlimited budget and you could do whatever program you wanted in the entire world, what would it be? But you had to spend it on like one big program or one small.
Oh, one big program. I was thinking I would hire a whole bunch of people and then let them spend the money on whatever programs they come up with. And I would have this wonderful, diverse team of librarians that represent, so many different populations. And then they get, but all,
I love that. I love that though. I do. That's actually great.
But if I wasn't allowed to do that, it would probably be on some kind of outreach program to take the library out of the building and get to reach those same populations we would reach with all these staff I talked about. Because I really think the important thing is finding ways. It's great. There's all this great diverse literature now, but how to make sure people are getting their hands on it and finding out about it, right, and getting them informed. And I think that's one good part of the pandemic is, got you going on a blog, got me going on a blog, and maybe others will follow suit. But I'd like to, and I also would like to see because libraries and reading are about relationships for me, that would be the thing I think I've missed in most of the time in the situations I've been in. It's been limited staff, and especially children, it's mostly just me and one other person, just being able to have that freedom to, oh my goodness, what if I had, 7 people I could hire, and they could, oh my, the people we could get to, and that they would excite to come into the library would be amazing, because I'm just me. So. And
then the last thing I'd like to know is if you had to sum up how Only Mostly Devastated made you feel in either just a word or a sound, what would it be?
The sound I came up with is, because every word I could think of, I thought cozy blanket. Oh, that's 2 words. So anyway, that's why I decided a cup of, those too many words. So then I went, what do those make me feel like?
Yeah. Well, this has been so great. Thank you so much for chatting with me.
No, you're welcome. No problem.
And everyone, I'll put a link below, but everyone go check out Books for Raising Good Humans. Well, thank you so much for joining me this week. If you want to follow my mom on Bookstagram, you can follow her at books.for.raising.good.humans. And that's the number 4, not the spelled out 4. She's on Instagram, Facebook, and most social media platforms, so go check her out. Next week, I'm sitting down to chat with a panel of readers about Only Mostly Devastated, so I'm very, very excited to sit down and share that with you. And if you've still not purchased your copy of the book, you can do so by following the link in the description below. And until next week, have a fantastic one. I will talk to you later.